client partnerships at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today we have counselors Dr. Ray and Jean Kadkhodaian to discuss the impact that family synergy therapy can play in helping to set healthy boundaries and open up communication avenues for blended families. Dr. Ray, Jean, how you guys doing today?
We are good. How are you?
Well, I'm doing okay, I guess.
We're back on, right?
We're back on. That's live video.
Oh, yeah. Technology these days, right?
Beyond me. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. You know what? I think I should clarify counselor and the word counselor, right? Because in the legal term, counselor means attorney as well, right?
Yeah, it does.
Yes. So we are therapists. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology. Jean has a master's in clinical psychology. And we have been working with couples and families for close to 25 years now. We started a clinic in the Chicagoland area, which is thriving and working throughout the Chicagoland area with couples and families and individuals. And Jean and I, we also have our own couples coaching program that we service couples internationally. We've been doing that for quite a while too, and our own podcast as well.
You know, in our own lives, we've had to deal with family. In our own lives, we've had to deal with our own relationship. And early on, we decided to specialize in doing this work because it is the most painful thing we go through when those relationships break down. And it's the most rewarding when they go well. And it's not very popular. People don't really like to talk about it. And so it's been this passion of ours and difficult to talk about, but very rewarding work.
Oh, I 100% believe that. One of the things that we see, from attorneys' perspective, is the challenges legally that blended families encounter between the visitations and the custody and that getting in the middle of everything. It's really challenging. But that's why I'm so, interested today, because you come at from kind of another angle. So can you talk some about the challenges that blended families encounter for your clients?
When you work with a couple, you're actually trying to diffuse some boundaries to help them merge. But when you're working with a family, the job of a child is to, at the moment of birth, start leaving you. And so we're designed to be monogamous. We're designed to be in, it is the healthiest way to be in the world, but it doesn't always work, and people don't always come together for the right reasons. And so any type of change in a primary relationship is going to cause pain. And when human beings are in pain, we don't behave very well.
The blended family is now the leading family structure in the United States. So that the whole traditional family, it doesn't exist anymore, right? There are more kids that are in blended families than there are kids in traditional marriages and traditional families. And so the dynamics and the challenges that are occurring because of that are very widespread. There isn't a role model, though, out there for how a step family is supposed to work together, right? The dynamics are very complex, especially now if you involve the stretched family, as we like to call it. Now you have multiple grandparents. Now you have multiple aunts and uncles on multiple sides. And you also have the parents who may be remarried now are having to deal with co-parenting and co-parenting with exes. And so it is very complex. And, Jean and I, we have a blended family. And so that's kind of the birth of why we started working with families to begin with, is that we saw the challenges and dynamics that we had to attend to. And there wasn't any guidebook out there or any mentors out there that were able to help us navigate that. So we had to figure it out on our own.
That makes so much sense. As attorneys, we counsel people in blended families, but like I said, it's like how to co-parent and not get yourself in trouble with the court, or get what your rights are, and that's a whole different kind of an animal. So you developed this process, and that you call family synergy therapy. And I mean, it's 3 words that I know all of them, but when I look at it together, I go, well, hold on, I haven't heard of this before, and this sounds really interesting. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the basics of what it is, and then maybe, kind of how that differs from, I guess, what you would call traditional family counseling.
Okay. So we should probably preface by how our field is structured. All right. So when a therapist goes to school, they get a master's or they get a doctorate, they're really schooled in basic therapy.
Human psychology.
Maybe they're taught a few different modalities, things that are very popular like CBT or emotion focused therapy. But when it comes to couples therapy or family therapy, there isn't any specific certification or degree that is required in order for you to call yourself a family therapist or a couples therapist. There is a degree called marriage and family therapy, and that specifically is about that. But anyone with a master's degree or a doctorate degree and licensed to do therapy can call themselves a marriage therapist or family therapist without any specific instruction or certification to do so. So in our experience in the field, originally it was being thrown into a session with a couple or thrown into a session with a family as an individual therapist. And you were just made to sink or swim. And there wasn't really much guidance given in order to help that family and help the couple. So we decided, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way of structuring these sessions so that we can take a couple and a family from point A to point B and be able to accomplish something and not just get kind of lost in the weeds in their drama.
All relationships start out as parent-child. That's what we learn. And we often show up as the child in our adult relationships. And you'll see this in families where everyone's trying to be the child. Everyone is trying to get their needs met, get attention, be understood. And the goal is actually the opposite, because the only thing we have control over is listening and understanding. We don't have control over being heard or someone else understanding us. And so family synergy therapy, you could think about it like a clock, and all those mechanisms in the clock, if they get stuck anywhere, the whole clock doesn't work. But it can be a small problem, but the whole thing looks like it's broken and doesn't work. And that's our goal. Our goal is to look at these moving parts and how they can join the system in a way that feels comfortable, including boundaries about not behaving in certain ways. Because if the goal is for the family to be able to be in the room together and feel safe, then it's each person's job to make sure they're monitoring themselves. And so when we're working with a family, we're working with the individual person and with the family, because if you want to be heard, you got to become a listener.
In traditional family therapy, most often the focus is on the IP, the identified patient. So this is the person within the system, the family system, that is the most outspoken or has the most problems.
Right.
And so the focus becomes on that person and the entire family. It becomes, this spotlight on the individual that has the issue. But in family synergy therapy, our focus is on the system and not just the individual piece, because each person in the system occupies an important role. And in order for the system to change, it's not about changing an individual within the system. It's about changing the entire system.
Wow. Then, guys, we talked a little earlier. I know that to do that, you don't just have one necessarily therapist that does everything and
Right.
talks to everybody. And I really thought that was fascinating. So I like your clockwork analogy. So how does, kind of take us through the clock? How does it start? And
Everyone wants to be heard. So each person has someone to listen to them, their own therapist that really understands what's happening. And so if we're working with a family, Ray and I might be working with the parents, but then I will also join some of the sessions with the kids as a liaison to understand what does the child need. And these can be adult children or they can be older children. What are they looking for? What isn't feeling good for them? And then it's like a negotiation. So if you think about, if you tried to be the attorney for both people getting a divorce,
Yeah.
you can't do it, because your job is to champion for your team. Well, if the goal of the system is for everyone to champion for their person because they all want the system to work, it works. If someone thinks my way is the right way and everyone should conform, it doesn't work.
And it feels like everybody gets to talk to someone by themselves without having to worry about, am I saying something that's offending somebody? And so maybe I shouldn't put it this way.
Steve, a good example here is, I'm a classic violinist by training. And so when I used to play in symphony orchestras, you had a conductor, and the conductor would be in charge of uniting the entire symphony orchestra when we're playing. But in order to unite each section, like the violinist and the clarinets and everything, you have your own little section coach. And that person would work with those people individually. They would work with them as a group. And then you would come together as a whole, and the conductor would be able to work with everybody together. So we have a parental coordinator that is in charge of working with the family. And so when we do those family sessions, that parental coordinator is the one that conducts it. And each part of the family works with their own therapist individually. So when we come together as a whole, we have the individual therapist, we have the clients, and we have the parental coordinator that conducts that whole family session. So you could see all the moving parts, but each part is being attended to individually. And so when we come together as a whole, we have a goal in mind, and we have the facility and the ability to be able to meet that goal.
It sounds like you are able to sort of get to some of the causes this way, in a way that sort of everybody can feel comfortable.
Right.
And what do you do when you kind of get to the cause, kind of figure out what's going on? Does everybody then come together, or
See, I think maybe cause is the wrong term. We don't really get down to the cause, right? So if we go back to the idea of a symphony, if one group wants to play in the key of, I don't know music, but key of G, I don't know,
Okay.
and someone else like, well, I like the key of B better or something, it's not going to sound right, and you can't hear each other. So it's more of a collection of the structure of how are we going to behave? What are the house rules? And house rules are not just for kids; they're for everybody, right? And so if you're in a relationship with someone and that relationship isn't something that is healthy enough to have a difficult conversation for the cause to be resolved, it can be to just respect each other and be, don't be negative or don't be judgmental, those kind of things that just say, okay, everyone, for this week, we're just going to say, hello, how are you? And we're not even going to do any parenting or anything because it erupts something. Right. And so when people learn how to behave appropriately within a system, sometimes that's the best it can be, but that's still very satisfying.
Yeah. You're off ground zero. You talk about setting boundaries, and that's something that even as attorneys, we talk about in co-parenting kind of stuff, but setting boundaries in a blended family has got to be a little more complex. Maybe it's not, but it feels like it's more complex, than maybe couples or husband and wife or something like that.
When you start with the goal in mind, then you can reverse engineer to what you want it to be. And so when we're meeting with co-parents, one of the things that we help them identify is what kind of person do they want their child to be in the future when they're an adult? Do they want them to be successful, both also in career and also in relationships? Do they want their child to become a good parent? Being able to be loving and kind and caring. And so we have them identify that. So if that's what they want them to be, what are the steps they need to take in order to teach that?
We were working with a family, and the father came into the marriage with 3 girls, and the mother came into the marriage with 2 boys. So there's 5 kids and parents. And this couple fought all the time. And the house rule, when you talk about boundaries are different than house rules. House rules is an absolute. So that this is the problem, there's a consequence. If you speed, you get a ticket, right? But boundaries are about, what am I going to do? So the kids were really upset that these parents were fighting all the time. So they decided to unite together. And if the parents started fighting, they were going to leave the house. And there was some that were old enough to drive all the way down to like a 4th grader or something. And then we brought the parents in the room, and the kids said to them, you know what, this is really upsetting to us. Here's what we are going to do. Boundaries are about, I don't like what's happening, and this is what I'm going to do when it happens. It's not about you go behave, because we have no control over that. And it actually happened when the kids all got in the car and they left and they went bowling, and they stayed out of that toxic environment and went and bonded and had a good time. And the parents had to look at themselves and go, we just drove our kids out of the house because we're not behaving and we have a problem we have to work on. And so I don't know if that clarifies and makes sense about boundaries that are about what am I going to do?
Right.
I'm not controlling someone else.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would think of setting boundaries as, I'm putting a fence around you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And no, that's not what it is. It's, I'm going to put something around me that I'm going to make decisions on. Why? Kind of a dumb question probably, but why? Why are boundaries important, and what do they achieve?
It sets up an expectation of personal responsibility. Because if you stay in a place of blame, you never have to change your own behavior. You never have to adjust your own contribution to the dysfunction in the family. So boundary is, this is what you can expect from me. So I am maintaining my own boundary, and it's my responsibility to do that. It's not the responsibility of someone else to maintain my boundary, right? And that's really one of the biggest shifts that we make with families, is that to get them from a place of blame, whether it's blame that this individual in the family is causing the drama, or the blame that the parents aren't doing this, or it's let's get off blame and let's focus on what I have control, power to change, right? Because that's the only thing I have power and control over. And if I could take responsibility for that, and I can maintain my own boundaries, then the system starts to shift just on its own.
We always want everyone else to do the work. And we know when we get hurt, but we don't know when we're hurting someone else. And so in a system, if let's say we create a house rule, and the house rule says everyone is going to be at the dinner table at 6 p.m. and one person doesn't show up, well, now you know who the problem is. But if everyone else goes, well, not everyone else is showing up, so I'm not going to show up, you can't tell what the problem is. You
Right.
can't see what needs to be corrected. And so we tell people, even if no one else is there, you're sitting down. If you're my client, you're sitting down no matter what. And then we have something to talk about. But if you just go, well, no one else is going to do it, so I'm not going to do it either, you can't change. You can't become empowered. That's the goal.
The first thing that I strikes me from what you guys were saying is that when I used the term cause, I was back in the traditional kind of thing. And that's where you're steering away from worrying about the cause, but controlling yourself. And so many times we see in divorces, one party blame the other party on, well, everything. And that's how they choose to live. And this kind of gets away from them. And okay, let's forget about that. And what am I going to do?
We always teach that there are two winners or two losers.
Yeah, it's exactly right. You talk about house rules, so that also is kind of included in setting up the system, is having what I'm going to do myself, but also some house rules.
Yeah, we think about that like a cast. Like if you broke your leg, you would put a cast on it so that you're not continuing to injure it as it's trying to heal. It isn't, the house rules aren't designed to do that forever.
Right.
They're designed to create a temporary condition so that healing can take place, instead of there constantly being jarring things bumping into this bone that's trying to heal.
And it's something that of an expectation that is across the board of everyone in the house, because up until that point, usually rules and consequences are used as weapons. They're used to manipulate members of the family, right? And it creates power struggles. And what we want to do is we want to eliminate all of that by creating an environment of consistency and something that every member of the family can expect and count on. Because from there, if we could create that consistency, now we have something to build on, a foundation that can foster trust.
Yep. So if I came to you and I said, well, I really like this idea, but I don't know where to start when it comes to setting a boundary. Physically, kind of structurally, what do I do? Where do I start?
Whenever we're working with a human being, whether they're in a couple, whether they're in a family, or whether it's individual, most people don't know themselves. And that's the first part of the journey, is to understand, well, why does this bother me? What do I need? What am I willing to do? Right. So we're working with a couple right now, and she does not like confrontation. And she says he's very aggressive. And I said, well, if I had a camera in your house without sound, what would that look like? She goes, he gives me a look. And I said, so he's not calling you names. He's not hitting you. He's not throwing things. Nope. He gives me a look. Well, she has a connection to a look her mom used to give her when she was a kid. So now she has this pairing, and she sees her partner as this monster when he gives her the look. And I said, well, what if you could find that funny? And she was like, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, if he was a 4-year-old boy and he was giving you the look because he was upset, you wouldn't be dismissing him. You would have compassion for him. You would tolerate a 4-year-old saying, I hate you, mommy, or whatever that was. And then you would help him calm down and listen to him. What's really going on? So the first thing is, what's really going on? What are the things that are really bothering the individual person? And that's their job, to work on the healing of that. And then you decide what Dr. A was saying about how would you like things to be? If you have a stepmother who is very critical and judgmental, you can expect that if the family gathers, you're going to hear something. That's just how it is. You're not going to change that person. So what are you going to do? Well, what if you made a game of it? What if before you even walked in the room, you're like, oh, I bet you within 1 minute and 37 seconds, the first one's going to come out. Or in the first 20 minutes, I'll hear 5. And someone else go, oh no, I'm only going to hear 4. And then you are actually accepting the judgmental person as they are. and you're not taking it personally. So you're like, okay, they're going to judge. That's what they do. It's not about me. It helps support the other people in having to tolerate that, but also trying to have some compassion, because only a hurting person is going to be judgmental and critical. Or
Yeah.
mean.
Does someone then, do they communicate their values or their boundaries? Is that part of it? Is that, I mean, do you let the others know that this is sort of my boundary, or is that more of an internal?
So that's where the structure of our program comes into place, right? Because if you throw a family into a room and you tell them, okay, I want you to state your boundaries to each other, this train is going to go off the tracks pretty quickly. Okay.
Yeah.
The system is very ingrained in the cycle of communication, the cycle of dysfunction, and they've been practicing that for a very long time. So for a therapist to walk into the room and try to disrupt that is nearly impossible. And so that's why we have the individual pieces, right? Where a therapist is working on that person, helping them identify within themselves what they need to change, what they can control, and then helping them and guiding them on how to present that and how to present it in a different way, not in the same, communication style that they're used to, but to do it in a way that's going to be much more assertive and effective. And so then when we come together as a family, now we are guiding them in a way that they're communicating and hearing each other. And we are preventing that same dysfunction to come back up.
Oh my God.
Oftentimes things are very unconscious.
Yeah.
And so if you ask a family, let's say you have a parent and a child, maybe the kid's a teenager, how do you want to feel in your home? And they're all going to say, I want to feel connected. I want to feel safe. I want to feel I belong. Everyone's going to agree with that. And then if you ask the person, do you know what makes your dad feel like he doesn't belong? Do you know what makes your child feel that way? And they'll go, I don't know what they feel. I just know what I feel. And then we get to this place of, well, when you come in and you haven't cleaned your room, it feels bad for this person. Or if they are late and don't communicate with you, that feels bad. And it's like, do you want this person to feel safe with you? Do you want to help them feel like they belong? And people usually say yes. And the corrections are usually really small. It's kind of weird. We don't even know these little things that we do that slight other people. And then in our minds, it turns into a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
And then we get a lot of resentment and anger around that.
Getting into this conversation, I'm thinking that, this is a family thing, and there's everybody, gets plugged in here and here, and it's about, them as well. And now I kind of feel like it's about what I need to do. So can someone take that? Because obviously blended families, while they can be different things, they are often, families that include ex-spouses and ex-partners. Can a person take what you're talking about and teaching to that level and apply it to, to the ex-spouse who calls up at 4:38 and says, yeah, I'm not coming at 5?
Well, once you start looking at yourself and what you have power and control over changing, then you can start to let go of the people that you don't have control of, right? You have control of whether you're going to hold resentment towards your ex-partner who's not in the room, and you could continue to seethe about them and the fact that they're not doing what it is that you want them to do, but that just only affects you. Right. And so
Yep.
we had a client who she started to look at it like a job. Is that, I punch a clock and now I have to deal with my ex-partner and, co-parent. And then when I'm not dealing with them, I clock out. So I'm now compartmentalizing, and I'm not going to sit there and hold on to anger and resentment towards my ex-partner when they're not part of my immediate life.
You know, we actually had that situation in our family. So our oldest son's dad would often not show up for his time with his son. And, you know, if you take that on, if you're the parents, you take responsibility for that. You take responsibility for how your child feels. And at some point, we would tell him, well, we've decided as the adults that you're not spending time with him today. We took it on ourselves.
Right.
So he didn't feel the rejection and the whatever. It's like, no, you have to deal with hanging out with us tonight. And it is very, very emotional to have to do those kind of things. But if you always think about what's best for your child, it's not going to be fair for sure. If you're the responsible parent and the other person isn't doing what they've agreed to do or what they're supposed to be doing, you know, you don't just take it and let the kid deal with that. You hold on to that for them.
Wow. This is fascinating. We are unfortunately getting close to being the end, but I want to ask that, am I right? This is not the norm. This is not coming in and asking my, stepkids are this, or my, this is that. We need to change how they're acting. We need to change them. And in divorce, it's all the time. They come in, what can I do to change my ex's this? Or what can I do to, but it's about changing other people. This is about changing yourself. And
we always say you don't get divorced in a courtroom, you get divorced in your heart.
Yeah.
And there are people who are very much married, even though they're legally divorced.
Yep. Before we go, I just want to kind of run through that. This isn't really, come in and go, well, so what's going on today? Well, this is going on. Okay, let's talk about that. This feels like a more structured approach.
Yeah, that's a disaster waiting to happen right there.
Right. So how long does it take?
So ours is 10 to 12 weeks. It's a 10 to 12 week program for the parents. And, when you think about, for example, rehabbing a house, right? You're not going to just start to do the finer details if your foundation is shoddy. So we look at it from that perspective, that we have to work on the foundation, each individual part of the system and the system as a whole. We build that foundation to a place where they can actually deal with the issues. And if you try to get them to jump right into the issues right away, it's just going to fall apart.
Right. You're not changing the issues. You're changing how you deal with the issues.
Yep. Yes.
I think that's genius, actually. We almost are out of time. Is there something I missed? Is there something you want to say? You've been like, hey, why isn't he going to ask this? It happens all the time.
One thing I would like to say is that we always look from this bigger perspective about what is really going on this planet. Why are we here? What are we supposed to do from all these people who we feel are our teachers, right? Whether they're our children or our ex-partner, they have something to teach us. It's our job to learn it, even if we never resolve anything.
Right.
And so I always like to say, we know what fertilizer is made of, and that's how we grow. Yeah. And so if your only goal is to understand why are these people in my life and what can they teach me, and you never resolve anything, that's still an awesome outcome.
I would imagine we would walk away from your system being able to deal with a lot of other things than just our family. I mean, this sort of holds true for like you said, the world.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We are the common denominator. We take ourselves wherever we go.
Yeah. I love that. Well, gosh, we are out. Thank you so much for being here today and sitting down and talking about what family synergy therapy is, how it really creates healthy boundaries. And we didn't really talk too much about the healthy part, but it just came out. I mean, I was describing boundaries. Those were not the healthy boundaries. The ones you were describing were. And you communicated it in like real words, and no jargon, and stuff that people like even me can understand. And so that's really good. And thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great for you being here.
It was
And
wonderful.
everyone else.
This chat.
Right. So if anyone wants to learn more about FST, Family Synergy Therapy, our clinic in Chicago, the Lighthouse Emotional Wellness Center is where our staff, is conducting a lot of that work. lighthouseemotionalwellness.com is the website. And if they want to learn about the couples work that we do, which is Couples Synergy, they can look us up at couplessynergy.com.
One last question I just thought. If someone comes in, a family comes in, a couple comes in, they don't have to go out and get their own here therapist.
No.
They're all in with you. They're separate but equal.
And we've worked with families where, maybe one kid's away at college and one lives in a different state and two are at home. And it really works wonderful with technology. You can make those things happen now.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. Well, thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. If anyone has further questions on today's topic, you can post it here, or you can get a hold of them directly. But if you do post it here, we will also get you connected with Dr. Ray and Jean. And until next time, stay safe, stay happy, and be well.